Welcome to Spider-Verse Minute, the tri-weekly podcast where we watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 1 minute at a time. I'm Sean Slater.
And I'm his sister Caroline.
And today we open up minute 19 with Miles entering his room and end a minute later with him calling his dad.
I have nicknamed this minute Spider-Men? Question mark? Because I'm dramatic. You know, gotta have all the question marks. I only put 2. I limited myself.
One thing I noticed as he's flopping around still on the outside of the building, he's about to enter the building. One of the when he slams his face into the wall at one point, it looks like he's just got the pigeon full in his fist, like he's actually holding on to it instead of it just being stuck to him. But it's and I imagine like the pigeon being like trying to actually fly away, and he's like, "No, you're keeping me up." Like he's like, "No, the pigeons are holding me afloat and not letting me fall."
I didn't notice that. That's funny. I did notice that every time he collided into the wall, there was more of those impact draws lines.
Yeah.
Which I always find amusing. He also just had some funny faces when you could see his face and it was just smushed against the window, and I'm like, oh, okay.
One thing I noticed with his outfit that I hadn't really picked up before is that it's similar to the outfit that Childish Gambino wears in his This Is America music video, where it's just gray pants and a no shirt.
Except Miles has a tie. He keeps it classy.
Miles is much classier.
He wears a tie with it. It's the classier. That's right. I like that music video. I didn't even make that connection. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's not I don't think it's a deliberate connection, because that music video came out in early May of 2018, and the movie came out in December of 2018.
Yeah.
And so that would have been an
insane
much more difficult
connection if they did that on purpose.
I think it's more of just hey, he's in Childish Gambino is in a school uniform in the music video, and Miles is in his school uniform in the in
this scene, in this minute.
Yeah, and just in general, he's wearing a school uniform at school. But I think you can draw at least the parallels. Childish Gambino makes a small cameo in this as
I was gonna say
as Donald Glover later in the movie, and there's been in the we talked about in Spider-Man Homecoming how he makes a cameo as Aaron.
It's Aaron. I was just gonna bring up how in the previous minute they have one of Donald Glover's scenes from Community? Was that it?
Yeah. That was the cameo I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So once Miles enters the apartment, he falls onto the floor, and a comic comes crashing down onto his face, and he gets.
Sorry, just a comic comes crashing down on him like a comic is really heavy or something. It flutters from the bed.
Yeah.
Just funny choice of words to me. That's all.
Yeah, we get the True Life Tales of Spider-Man, the origin of Spider-Man.
Yeah. I want to, before you talk about it, because I know you're probably going to have a lot about this comic book cover, I want to point out one thing that I noticed all by myself, so I'm quite proud of it, was that on the cover, Spider-Man has a speech bubble. And I didn't write down the whole speech bubble, because it really wasn't that important, but I noticed this, and it said that the world may mock Billy Barker, the timid teenager, and then there's more to it, talking about, Spider-Man being the hero and stuff, and I'm like, 2 thoughts ran through my head. First was, they named Spider-Man in the comics Billy Barker for this, which I
You
thought,
gotta hide his real identity, Peter Parker.
Yeah, and
Obviously, they're two totally different people.
well, the more I thought about it, I'm like, actually, you know what? I guess it really isn't. It's different enough that no one would really make a connection.
Mm,
I don't know. Just saying, like, no one's caught on yet. At least that we've seen. Or have been said. So that made me laugh. But then the other thing that came through my head is like, why is Spider-Man saying this out loud on the cover? Because he's holding a criminal when he's saying this.
we don't know if it's a criminal. He's just holding somebody.
Still, why is he saying this out loud?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, it's clearly a speech bubble. Like, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm just looking at it wrong. It's like, no, that's a speech bubble. What? Why is Spider-Man saying this?
Yeah, so this cover is an actual, quote unquote, actual cover. It's based off of the Amazing Fantasy number 15 cover, which was where Spider-Man was first, where he first appeared. And like the real Amazing Fantasy 15s go for like tens of thousands of dollars these days if you buy like one in mint condition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but the cover price is only 12 cents, which
I
is
just,
on this cover, but it's also like on the actual cover.
yeah.
I wish comics were only 12 cents these days. Or
Right.
only cost 12 cents. It'd be much nicer.
Oh my gosh.
On my
So I'm looking
wallet.
at the actual comic cover too. And it really does say, in speech bubbles, though the world may mock Peter Parker, the timid teenager, it will soon marvel at the awesome might of Spider-Man. And it says the same thing, except with Billy Barker in the movie.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I thought they
It
just
also-
added that. Nope, that's a real thing.
And the cover, the one change they did make is the person that's being carried. They changed who it was. It's actually Bob Persecchi. Persichetti. Yeah, sorry. It's Bob Persichetti, who's one of the directors of the movie. And then on the back cover, like the ad that says, "Do
Yeah.
you know at least 10 people?"
I saw that ad.
All of those people are the other directors, producers, and writers. So like Amy Pascal, Pam Marsden, Kristen Steinberg, who are all producers and worked on this. Like there are some of the people that appear on there,
That's really clever.
which is always really cool. When
Another thing I noticed on this cover that maybe you'll be able to answer is that on the top corner it says approved by Cabin Fever. Yeah, I looked it up. I couldn't find anything, so I don't know if is this their version of the Comics Code?
yeah, up in that corner, it looks like it is probably just a parody of the Comics Code Authority stamp, which makes me wonder, like, if they jokingly used it in the beginning, why didn't they jokingly use it here again? Like,
They made this cover before they had the actual approval to use the Comics Code. So they're like, you know what? I don't want to change it. That was a lot of detail work.
and then the other two things on the cover that they kind of have accurate / moved around, is the date. So it says 15 August. Appears on both of them, the original and this parody one. And then the MC below the MV below the Cabin Fever appears a little bit lower than it does on the original comic. And on the original, it's an MC. So I'm not sure if that's supposed to be like a date, like in Roman numerals, but I'm not sure off the top of my head what that would be.
Yeah.
Or if it's just some other distinguishing mark.
I'm not sure. If I may move forward about the comic, when Miles sort of tears it open unintentionally because he's still sticking to everything with his hands.
Yeah.
You notice that Billy, aka Peter, is a brunette in the comic, which I thought was kind of interesting because in an earlier minute we see a flash of him, and the Peter Parker in this universe is a blonde.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta hide your identity somehow. And
Billy Parker only covers the name. You gotta make him look different, too. Then no one's suspicious. They're like, I know a Peter Parker. Hey, Peter, did you know you have a really similar name to Billy? Huh, I didn't know that. Yeah, but you look nothing like him, so just the name.
Yeah, I did like how they made it so that, like, their origins were exactly the same. Like, he says the same things.
Yeah.
And, I thought that was
very cool
neat.
Parallel of the two.
And the interior of this was done by Marcello Vignali, who we talked about in minute 2 as doing a bunch of the mocking up a bunch of the comics, and he did this interior.
Honestly, the comic covers in this movie, like the multiple ones they do, and even the interiors that we see, are just amazing. They're so cool.
Yeah. And then it cuts to, like, the next quote-unquote chapter of the movie where the two Spider-Men, like, comic slaps down, and we move on to
but before I need to talk about this cover, because it's so simple, but I absolutely love this cover. This might be, like, my favorite of the covers they do. Like, I would love to read this comic, or at least have a poster of this cover, because it's so simple. It's just Miles and, like, his clothes and, like, his jacket and t-shirt and baggy pants on the side of a wall, and then his reflection is Spider-Man. And I don't know.
I feel like this feels like a cover that they've done in real life. Like, I have a mental image of this being an actual cover, but I'm not sure which one, if it is actually one, or if I'm just thinking of this as the cover. I do like really minimal covers. The DC right now is doing some covers like this. So Josh Middleton has been doing a bunch of those variants, and I just really like his art, and they're very, like, they're not super busy covers. It's usually I've been getting them all for the Batgirl comics, and it's usually just, like, Batgirl on the cover with maybe a little something going around her. And this kind of reminds me of that, where it's a very simple, like, there's not a lot going on. You can just take in the two main, like, people in the cover, and so it's just nice. I really like my art in comics to be a lot more simpler and not, like, really busy feeling. And yeah, this kind of reminds me of that. The one other thing I did notice is on the we missed it before, but the Cabin Fever, approved by Cabin Fever production code, is also on the comic behind the one that the two Spider-Men covers.
Oh, that's funny. Maybe that is just this universe version of the comics code, because, like, we've already seen a few.
Yeah, I mean, it's showing up in the places where the Comics Code Authority usually does. So
yeah, we should, when the other comic appears, we should see if they all say Cabin Fever, or if they all say different things in those parts.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting to check out. Hopefully, we remember. So moving on from the cover.
Yeah.
I love this just running sequence of Miles in, like, complete panic, running down the street, and just this sort of denial of, like, no, I'm a normal kid. There was just a normal spider.
Yeah.
It's just puberty. Yeah, still going with the puberty thing, which I'm like, he's really hammering in that it's puberty. But, like, I don't know, there's something very human about that natural panic. He's not like, oh, sweet, I have superpowers now. He's like, no, I'm a normal kid. Like, this is not, like, no, nothing's wrong with me.
It's great, and, like, I love the way they shoot it, like, starting from him, like, really far away, and just, like, the people passing. in front of the camera also makes it feel a bit more panicky.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, a bit more panicky. And then when we get like really close in, it just enhances that like panic feel because it wobbles around, does a little bit of wobbly to show like, oh, he's, not running stably
Yeah.
and running into people.
And then get hit by a car and launches over the car.
Yeah, I think this is a great, like, a really good way to show his, like, the innate spider abilities.
Yeah.
And just, like, the reflexes that he has. And how, how good that all is. And the one other thing I noticed, too, is he's running down Flushing Avenue, which is it's a neighborhood in Queens. Like it's another real place that they stuck in.
Interesting that they chose a place from Queens to put in Brooklyn, though.
Well, I think Vision Academy might be in. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah. Is Vision Academy in Brooklyn?
Yeah, because it's like
Did we
Brooklyn.
figure that out?
Brooklyn's Vision.
Brooklyn Vision. Yeah, you're right. I don't know
Vision.
why I asked that. Yeah, it's they moved it around.
Yeah. It's still, it's just like nice little like Easter eggs like that where it's like, this is an actual place. We moved it, but it's an actual place. Or maybe it's just where it is in this universe. That's how they get away with it. It's like, that's just where it is in this universe.
I wonder if Visions is like that wouldn't really make sense. I was gonna say, I wonder if Visions is like has different campuses, and like there's a Queens Vision Academy and a Brooklyn and a Manhattan one. Yeah. And maybe like because this is just him like running away panicking, it might be like we just so happen to be passing a different Visions Academy, or like the Visions in Queens.
Yeah.
And that's why it's there, or not, and they just like to put that Easter egg in.
Yeah. I think it's more of they just like to put that Easter egg.
Yeah.
There's no in-universe explanation for it. Since we talked about the taxi, I do want to bring this up because I love pointing these out, is that the taxi has like that screech in that comic style written on it when it's stopping, and I didn't notice that like the first few times I watched the movie, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And then you bring up how it shows, the spider abilities, very like the natural ones he has. It's like that car like hard stopped. Like if it wasn't for those spider abilities, like Miles would have been really hurt.
Yeah.
So it really is that kind of cool.
Yeah, and like if you go frame by frame, you really see like they do a good job of showing how he gets hit, starts to roll up onto the car, and then just uses that like momentum of spinning to like push himself up.
Yeah.
And turns it into a like jump to save himself.
It's very cool. And this is just off topic a little bit, but it was like in the next second was the design of the building in the background. I just thought was really cool. Just the building behind him, it had this like cool step sort of style to the windows, and I'm like, that's awesome, and definitely a building you would see in New York.
Yeah. And then it cuts to him on the subway, and he's on his phone on the subway, and going through, and you see a bunch of his contacts, and I wanted to point them out because a lot of them, they might all be Easter eggs, but I wasn't able to find Easter egg-ish reasons for a couple of them. But the three big ones that I've seen pointed out a lot are under his favorites. He has B. Bendis, Sarah Pichelli, and Jason Reynolds.
Oh.
Which B. Bendis is Brian Bendis, who is the creator of Miles Morales.
Very nice, very nice. Before you really get into all of the context, just one thing I really want to point out that I thought was really cool and kind of interesting, because this is really the only time we see them, are the text boxes with no voice along with them.
Oh yeah, the
Like the later that night, Miles.
yeah, just the like setting text boxes
Yeah, like, and it's
that
really
are
the only
used.
time we see them in the movie. Uh, which I would love to hear like the reasoning behind why not bring them back other places, but I also kind of like that it's not.
Yeah, it does seem a little out of place. Like you could not have them there and it would still
Mm-hmm.
make sense.
It's like it's still bringing in
Yeah.
those comic elements, which is like I appreciate and I really like, and even the angles that like this we see the subway just even reminds me of a comic book as well. Like this is just one of those times where it's like this is a comic book coming off of a page into life. Um, but yeah, it was just really interesting because it almost is like they almost wanted a voice over there, but then at the same time they didn't want to like ruin that silent moment that they have of just Miles alone, confused and all freaked out.
Yeah, I think I feel like it might have been a bit better if they would have left it out,
Mm-hmm.
and just had the subway, at night going over it. Like it's kind of one of those show don't tell
Yeah.
points that I feel you know they did a good job showing, and I felt like that was them telling when they didn't really need to.
Yeah, I would have loved to hear the reasoning behind why they decided to put the text boxes there and then really not anywhere else in the movie. Like I feel like if they even did it maybe like one other time in the movie, it would have been like, "Oh, okay." Um that's just one thing I noticed. It's like they don't bring this back at any other point. M- Maybe it was because it's like they wanted to have something there, but and then like in other parts it was like it was such an emotional heavy point with those quiet times. And it's like this is a quiet time that's like just needs some quiet, not really is like an emotionally heavy place. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, just something I wanted to point out. It was very interesting to me.
yeah. And we see Miles on the train looking at his contacts,
Mm-hmm.
or looking through his contacts, and at the bottom, underneath his favorites, the three I want to point out first are B. Bendis, Sarah Pichelli, and Jason Reynolds. And B. Bendis is Brian Bendis, who is the original writer and creator of Miles Morales, and Sarah Pichelli was the illustrator for the original run of him as well. And then Jason Reynolds was the author, or he was the author writer of Miles Morales Spider-Man, which was the run after Brian left. But yeah, the Jason Reynolds run was really good too. That was the one that I started reading with, and I enjoyed it a lot. And then just like his regular context that he has, there's a lot of them, and some of them I had to like stretch a little bit for. Maybe others I didn't, because like their their like icons don't necessarily match up with like who the character's supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
for some of them. So I'll just go through it alphabetically real quick. um, Billy B. I thought of Billy Baxter, who's the character Shazam in DC Comics. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
that's a push. That's a push.
Maybe it's Billy Barker.
It could be. And then the next one is Cindy M, who's most likely Cindy Moon, who's the character Silk, or
Okay.
her superhero name is Silk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she was bitten at the same time in the comics universe. She's bitten by the same spider that Peter is at the same time, but then like
Oh.
she gets sequestered into a bunker for 10 years and then comes out.
Oh
And so like all of her references are, a decade and a half old, um, and stuff when she first comes out. The next one is Dal, who I didn't find anything like. I tried just looking up Dal Marvel, and the only time that a character I found named Dal
yeah. Mm-hmm.
was a Kree who appeared in Inhumans: The Great Refugee in 1995, but he's a Kree, so he doesn't really look like his portrait. So I think that one's a pretty
Bit of
big
a
stretch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next one that's a similar stretch to Billy B is Dinah L, who I thought of Dinah Lance from DC as well, who's the Black Canary. And then Ezekiel, I took as Ezekiel Sims, who is a character that tries to help the spider totems, and those kind of come into play in the Spider-Verse crossover or event.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one I think makes a bit more sense. Hal, I took as Hal Jordan from Green Lantern. Probably a stretch. And then Hank Emboy, I took as Hank McCoy, who's the Beast in X-Men, as just like a pun on his name.
I was gonna say, I'm sorry, repeat that name? Hank.
Emboy. And then the next one, this one is not confusing at all, and it's Jessica Drew, who's the Spider-Woman. The next one is Karn, who's the Master Weaver, who's an inheritor, and they hunt the spider totems, which are like the different spider people in the different universes. They call them spider totems, and they're the inheritors are the villains of the Spider-Verse crossover event. One that I really stretched was Catty K. I just thought of Kitty Pryde because Kitty. Even though the K and Pride don't really match up, I thought, maybe they're punning it. And then the one that is definitely a pun, I think, is Lavardis Burr, who I believe is a pun on LeVar Burton's name.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that sounds like LeVar Burton.
Yeah, because his real first name is Lavardis.
Really? I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, and yeah, he's of Star Trek and Reading Rainbow fame. So he's a real person.
He's a real person.
In case you didn't know that. The last three are Lisa, who there's a character named Lisa Pine, who appears in 2 issues in 1974, who's a vampire. She appears in Dracula Lives and Werewolf by Night.
What? These
yeah.
are Spider-Man comics?
No, these are just Marvel comics.
Okay. I was going to say, huh?
And then you have Monica C., who could be Monica Chang, who is a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent and appeared in the Avengers AI 2013 series. And last but not least, in his favorites, there's another character that appears that's in there as Rayshawn, who could also or is referencing Rayshawn Lucas, who's the Patriot, who's another superhero.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So like of all of them, there's a couple in there that are just like HH and and LL and Larry and Lance. Like I wasn't really able to figure out if those were real references, but for the most part they probably are, and I just don't know them well enough.
Those could be referencing anything. Like the HH, it's like Howard Hill.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, like the Marvel really does like its alliterative names.
They really
so
do.
It probably is somebody real.
It's, that's really all I have for this minute.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. The only thing I think I want to add, since we have ending him calling on his dad, is that I realized we didn't point out earlier, like when he's running, he's calling his Uncle Aaron.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I thought was, I didn't think of it at the time, but thinking of it now, I'm like, that's kind of interesting, and like again goes to show how close they are, that he's willing to call his uncle over his like dad or even his mom.
Yeah, and I wonder if that has, if that's because I think part of it's probably because Uncle Aaron was there when he was bit by the spider.
Probably.
But also part of it because like he doesn't want to have to explain to his dad like, oh, I left school, went to go hang out with Uncle Aaron, and then we went into the subway, climbed a fence, and did some illegal graffiti.
And I got bit by a spider.
And then I got bit by a spider. But don't get upset at Uncle Aaron.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
It probably
I think
has something that too.
It's probably partly that, and just partly he's got a better relationship with his uncle.
Because it definitely seems like his first instinct is to, like, I need to call Uncle Aaron.
Yeah, and like it doesn't. They don't show him like he immediately is calling Uncle Aaron, whereas here he has to like scroll through his contacts.
Yeah.
And like finally settle on his dad.
Yeah. Wait. Okay. I just realized that. Did you see that if in the favorites that Uncle Aaron was in his favorites?
Maybe he's got like a super favorites. Like, his favorites, but then like there's his super favorites,
there's
which
the
is
favorites,
just Uncle
and
Aaron.
then there's the super favorites, which you
It's
call
probably
a
like,
lot.
Yeah. Yeah, or like he doesn't even keep him in his favorites because it's always just like the second in his most recent call.
Yeah, like first or second, it's like, oh, your most recent call. Here you go. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, it's also weird that the favorites are below everybody else.
Right?
Like they appear to be at the bottom of the list.
Phones.
Yeah, one other thing I forgot about, I wanted to point out when he was running down the road, was that when the text boxes are appearing, with his like voiceover monologue stuff, they appear with the sound of like pages being turned, the like that flipping page sound.
Oh, that's
and I thought that was really cool.
I didn't notice that. That's so clever.
Yeah, and it also sounds like they're partially synced with some of the music going on, where like there's a couple of them, and it might just be me trying to recognize a pattern when there isn't one, but there's a couple I noticed that like when some of the like beat hits happen, like one of the panels like appears on screen or flies by on screen, but it's probably just me recognizing a pattern when there isn't one.
If it was done on purpose, that's so clever.
Yeah.
If it's just you recognizing a pattern, I mean, that's still kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's everything I have for this minute.
That's all for this minute. Thank you for listening. We will see you again on Wednesday. Until then,
have a nice day.
Bye.